So let's go. In today's video, you're going to learn a couple of ways to add movement to your breakdowns, and this is going to help your breakdowns by making them more interesting and more energetic, which eventually can lead you to better breakdowns and eventually better songs. These examples can all be used all at once, or you can use them one at a time. So let me know over here in the comments below, which one of these do you like the most? Now let's get down with this tutorial and let's get started. Let's go. One of the most common ways to add excitement in your breakdown is by introducing the main lead of your song in the middle of the breakdown. Now, instead of having a breakdown that doesn't have anything in the beginning, you're gonna start with this new exciting lead in the breakdown, and this essentially triggers the listener to keep on listening because you added something that keeps him interested in the song. Listen, for example, to the song called Cappadocia by Ben Bomer, where he does exactly what I'm saying to you. In the start of the breakdown, he adds the main lead of the song that is now evolving and will become the main lead of the song. And that's something that he also does in the song called Breathing. This is a pretty common tactic within melodic genres, and the idea is to hook your listener where you otherwise could lose it because it becomes a less interesting part in the song. But the lead is not the only element that you can achieve the same kind of effect in the breakdown, and that takes us to a second point in this video. The same kind of effect can be done when you add a vocal at the start of your breakdown. Sometimes you already have leads coming from the drop one, and just keeping this lead over there in the breakdown could be a little bit repetitive. So adding this vocal at the start of the breakdown could add something new and essentially something to trigger your listener to keep on listening to the song. Listen, for example, to the song called Group Love by Yodo. Through the smoke in the air. In addition to the lead that he already had, he added a vocal, and this essentially just raised the interest of the breakdown where otherwise could become a little bit repetitive. But you don't need a full vocal to do the same kind of effect. Sometimes just using a spoken word speech can have the same effect for you, as you can listen in a song called Maria by Fred Again.
If I can live through We've lost dancing this next 6 months.
This is just a speech, and there's some random words that you can add to your song, and essentially they have the same effect as a vocal to spark some interest in the middle of the breakdown. And you can do the same thing by adding some shouts or even some other ad-libs that could do the same thing for your song. But that's not all. Let's continue with our third category in this video. Another really cool way to add movement to your breakdown is by introducing a new chord progression at the start of the breakdown. And that's something that you can listen in the song called Best of Me by Artbot. Listen, for example, to how the bass line goes in the drop. And you can see, for example, that the song starts in A, then it goes up to C, and then it goes down to E and down to D. But when you listen to the breakdown, it plays a little bit differently over there. Let's listen over here. Essentially, in the breakdown, as you can see it over here in the MIDI, it's playing the same A, C, E, D, but instead of going down with the progression of the bass line, now he goes up with the progression, and that creates a really cool novelty effect to the chord progression. For example, if your song only has one note in the drop, adding a chord progression in the middle can be something cool to spark the interest of your listeners over there, and that's something that melodic techno and progressive house are doing a lot. If you listen, for example, to the song called Santorini by Spencer Brown, notice how the bass line in the drop only has one note. It's just one note playing over and over and over and over, but now when you listen over here in the breakdown, by changing the chord progression or the bass line, essentially you can create something new in your song and essentially re-hook your listener in the breakdown as well. That's something that I do in almost all my songs, and I definitely recommend you doing as well. But since we're talking about movement, the most common way to create movement in your sounds is essentially by adding automation into your sound design, which takes us to our next point in this video. Doing a lot of automation in the sound design of your elements is definitely the most common way to enhance the movement of the breakdown in your song. Essentially, what you're doing is making the sounds that are this intense evolve into something that are a lot more intense, and this adds energy and adds interest to the story of your song as well. Listen, for example, to the song called IY by Yodo and Lane 8, and listen to the lead at the start of the breakdown over there. Now listen to the same lead, but now by the end of the breakdown. It sounds a lot more intense, a lot more energetic, and this essentially hooks the listener into the song and avoids them from going away from the song. So essentially, you can start your elements a bit like this. And by the end of the breakdown, it can sound like this. But how can you do this? Well, essentially what you can do over here is intensify the decay time, open more noise level, or even open the cutoff of your sound. And other things that you can do is add more distortion or even make the sound with a little bit more reverb. And this is going to essentially make the sound a bit more interesting to your listener to keep on listening along the way. If you're liking the video so far, let us know over here in the comments if you'd like a video just like this about build-ups. Let us know over in the comments below. There are other elements that you can add into your breakdown to make them more interesting along with your sound design, and that takes us to our next point in this video. In addition to doing more automation in the sound design of your elements, you can start introducing new elements that add a lot of energy into your song as well. Listen, for example, how in the song IY, they start the break without any bass line over there, as you can listen over here. But then out of a sudden they're reintroducing the bass line, and this just adds a lot of energy to the song, as you can listen over here. And you can see the same thing being done in the song called Beyond Beliefs by Ben Bomer, as you can listen over here. Reintroducing the bass line in the middle of the breakdown is really cool because this adds a lot of energy in the middle of the breakdown. But for this to happen, you must take off the energy when the breakdown starts. And sometimes when you do this, it loses a lot of energy. So what do you do when taking away the bass line sucks away all the energy from your song? And that takes us to our next point in this video. Sometimes when you take the bass line out of your breakdown, it just makes things empty and dead. And keeping some elements like percussions from your drop make the breakdown a bit more interesting and a bit less empty as it would be without the bass line. Listen, for example, to Let's Good by Kanye Musica, and listen how the percussions help keep the groove and the energy of the song over there. Without the percussions, that could sound a little bit too empty and essentially boring, which would take the listener away from your song. But sometimes taking the bass line is fine, and then adding percussions in the middle of the breakdown is also a really cool move to add interest along the breakdown as well. Listen, for example, later on Let's Good, they add all the percussions back, and this is how it sounds like without and then with percussions in the middle of the breakdown. See how the percussions just made the vocals sound even better and the song sound even groovier, more interesting? Now the same thing happens in chiller melodic house songs like Breathing from Ben Bomer, as you can listen over here.
Breathing underwater isn't hard, I try.
In there, Ben Bomer added a tick, 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 and this made the breakdown a bit more rhythmic and a bit more interesting. And the same happens in more aggressive kinds of melodic house, as you can listen in Tin Liquor songs All That I Lost. Notice how more aggressive songs require more aggressive kind of percussions, and simpler songs require simpler kind of percussions over there. But there's one percussive element that I love adding into my songs, and that takes us to our next point in this video. Adding the kick at the beginning of your breakdown is just really cool because it keeps the energy and it keeps marking the pace as it would in the drop, but now in the break scenario. Listen, for example, to Cola by Camel Fat, and listen how they keep the kick in the beginning of their breakdown.
How she looks like trouble.
But I want you to notice one thing over here in the waveform of Camel Fat's song. Listen, for example, how the kick in the drop is a lot bigger than the kick in the breakdown over here, as you can see this little bit over here. So how can you achieve this when doing your own song? First, what you have to do, you pick your first kick. And then after picking your kick, you're gonna make it a little bit smaller. 1/16 is normally okay. And then you're gonna add a low cut and a high cut. And essentially this way, the idea here is to make the kick less exciting than in the drop, so when the drop comes, the kick is still the biggest part of the song over there and not in the break. And you can see the same thing happening in the song called Aquatic by Nora En Pure. A really chill kick in the breakdown, but listen to the kick in the drop. A kick that is a lot bigger and a lot more interesting too. Remember, the kick in the breakdown is just to add a little bit of pace to the sound and not to have the full intensity as in the drop, so that's why we're doing it this way. But what about the drops? What if you want to make your drops more interesting with ear candies as well? Then you can watch these videos over here, or you can watch how Ben Boomer uses ear candies in this video over here. I hope you liked the video, and I hope to see you in the next Abstrakt video next week. Ciao.